let's jump into it, right?
Yeah.
Great. I'm joined by the one and only founder of Karitha, the Realm of Karitha, Amir Brooks. This is his face, shown in full for the first time live. Thanks for taking the time. We're going to spend, I don't know how much time yet, but maybe 30, 45 minutes on kind of talking about the project, of course, but then also in more general terms about the blockchain industry, about gaming in the blockchain industry, and most importantly, how we can get people into it and show the benefits and use cases of blockchain technology. So yeah, thank you for taking the time and talking to the community, I guess.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to not only speak to you, Lucas, but getting back into the community talk, especially as, I think right now with the whole crypto scene, it's really good for people who are really visionaries to actually explain what they want to do with their project and, provide a reason, like a reason why they've been even developing a project instead of, people speculate. And I guess what happened with SBF is that he was very shady. It's just that everyone took him as a joke. Like when he was shady, it turned out, I guess it wasn't actually a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe let's start there. I think some people probably already know a little bit about your background, but for those who don't, let's start with a little bit about yourself and how you even got into this whole shady blockchain business.
Well, the first time I ever got into cryptocurrency was actually in like late 2017. That was the first time like XRP and things came into the news in Australia. And the more I looked into it, it was actually very interesting because I knew a lot of people in finance. They're working at Deloitte now, and I guess PwC. People are familiar with that. And at the time, what it seemed like cryptocurrency was really doing is kind of making money move pretty fast, and that was kind of the pitch of XRP with the whole protocol they have. And that kind of made me deep dive into it. I created like my own community on Twitter back then. I think I had like a couple thousand followers back then. Had a website and all of that. But over time, I realized I was very biased. When you want the thing you're invested in to do well, you kind of like hide yourself from the facts and the actual things related to why it won't do as well as it could do, or whether or not it's overvaluated. So over time, I found different coins. Like for example, my second biggest investment was Chainlink, and that did really well. I invested it back when it was in like I think 30, 40 cents, and I think it went up to like 30 or something dollars.
Yeah.
So at the time during that, I met different people. I met a developer. Now he's actually I think runs 3 different projects on Ethereum, and he's building a XRP because we're actually launching a EVM integration. I think in January. So just from different experiences over time, I've always enjoyed creating businesses from scratch. I've been pretty much an entrepreneur since I was like around 11 years old. And I guess
What
actually
was
not
your
many
first
people know that
business?
I'm only 20. Sorry.
What was your first business at 11? Did you have a lemonade stand?
So, well, at the time, actually, so my parents owned a business back then, and like I used to, like buy things and sell it to people at the bowling. Like, so we owned a bowling center. I used to sell things there, and then I actually moved to online stuff. So, like, I created one of the first Minecraft servers back when it was in its alpha. There was Maple Story, World of Warcraft, a bunch of online games. Probably the biggest success back then was definitely my Minecraft server. Back when I was in high school, whatever it was, ended up doing like close to 1,000 a month back when I was in high school. So it was really big then because it was like one of the first few Minecraft servers, and that actually ironically started from my room. I left my computer on 24/7 until we actually moved to like a virtual private server because at the time we were just hosting it for friends, acquaintances and whatever, and eventually got to a point where there was always 50 people on. Probably I think peak was over 100. So like over time that gave me like ideas. If you really want something to succeed, it kind of just relies on how far you want to take it and when you take the first step. So essentially what ended up happening with last bull run was I made a lot of, I guess, investments, made a lot of good trades, a lot of bad trades. I made a lot of profit there and I'm pretty happy with it. It's just Near the end of the bull run, towards December, I got into the NFT scene on Aaron, Lukas, as well as like DuckDuckJoe and a bunch of other elders I've met, and I realized it was really a influencer-led market where if one person makes a tweet and it moves an entire market because it's very low. And I noticed that because a lot of the projects I kept mentioning kept doing really well. Like I think Skeezy was one of the first projects back then. It was super expensive, like 5 year or 3 year old. And I think there was another guy in the UK. We used to talk about it, and he and I basically made everyone really want to purchase those NFTs. And over time, I realized, actually, it's really shady when you have like say 50 year gold, 100 year gold. You can buy an entire floor, and then you basically just mention on Twitter, and you just sell it to people. And that's essentially what's happening in the NFT scene from January. Is just that you have all these influencers that sweep up the floor, and then they just sell it to people at a lower price. And essentially that led me to an idea where I'm like, you know what, I want to actually create a project with an actual purpose behind it and from a gaming experience and like understanding what really makes games like enjoyable past what's set out. So for example, if you play a story game, you just have this story. So what I really wanted to create a game was where the story isn't really the focus. It's more like the entire process, which is why Karitha has a lot of settings in where you can change how the outcome turns into be. So in the sandbox we're making, so we're discussing with OCS what we want to provide for them to allow more of a customized experience for their community, and that's going to allow us to really shape the settings we will provide other people. So it really was a decision to really just provide utility open to an NFT beyond just buy this NFT, increase the floor price.
Let's take a step back to kind of the beginning of Karitha, right? Like, or Karitha. You also switch sometimes. I feel. I still haven't decided how to pronounce it. But I think you guys got started in January or something with a core team of how many?
So initially, I actually, because I'm not like fully experienced in really art or whatever, I'm more of a entrepreneur in that sense where I bring people together. So initially I started looking for someone in November. I actually made a post on Instagram asking if anyone knows pixel artists. And in December, I got in touch with the initial sound person as well as Potato Man. And we basically made some sketches, which you can actually see some of the original sketches where we had different types of, sprites as well as buildings. And then in January, we started refining a building set. And from that building set, we pushed it live from January 17th is when we started to really go live but up until I believe the entire Genesis collection was sold out, we actually was private with our Discord. So it was really a slow but very articulate process in how we really communicated everything.
Yeah. I remember, so for me, I don't have a gaming background, and I want to know more about your gaming background as well, because I think you obviously take inspiration from different things that you played as a kid and maybe still play, right? But for me, what impressed me the most in the beginning was like that I didn't understand the project, right? Like it was like I saw this thing and it was this like huge like explanation of factions and all of these different elements of the game, and myself not being used to like these MMORPGs, whatever they're called, like that I was like, oh whoa, what was going on here? I need to like read basically an entire like handbook in order to even understand on how to get started or whether this investment makes sense. And so I think that's what attracted me at first. And it's like, oh my god, here somebody's actually like planning something and going for an entire world rather than just some pixels and stuff like that. So that's what impressed me first. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about the kind of like first idea on what you wanted to create and what the inspiration behind that was.
Yeah, so there was actually pieces of inspiration across different types of, I guess, memories growing up. And I guess one of them, relationship between every memory of mine is really the emotions you feel playing the game in terms of, the people you play with or the reasons why it was so memorable. And I realized looking back, a lot of the times was a lot of the memories, despite how small like time I played them, I still remember the time when I used to talk to a bunch of random people online, like in the games, just communicating with them where there was no really end goal. So back, I guess in the early mid 2000s or whatever, there was like MapleStory is a huge game where it's pretty much all social because it took forever to level up. So people actually spent more time kind of socializing, doing nothing. And even though you're kind of doing nothing, it was actually so fun. And from there was different types of games where there was also Habbo, where it was essentially just a room and you buy furniture and you place the furniture down, but then the people found ways to make games based on what they have. So that gave me ideas where the role-playing aspects of games is the freedom that a player has to create the different types of games within like the world that they've created of Habbo.
Hmm.
So that's why initially I thought, well, MMOs don't really have that anymore. It's really a PVM sort of game. So
What
I
does
want to
PVM
build
mean?
sorry, play versus monster. So that's
Okay.
usually, like end game content, like well, end game in the sense of, like there's no more content after a certain point. So people usually they'll spend like hours, doing a raid, which is, like a instance where you kind of like fight all these monsters that are super hard or whatever, and you need good gear. And to get the gear, you have to do some grinding, and then maybe spend like a total of like, I don't know, a total of 10 days game time over a couple of months, or maybe even most people play a lot more. But essentially, I realized the only thing that was missing from them was really for people who just want to enjoy themselves, not just play, like do the high pace game, but really just socialize, connect with people, and still have an impact of how they play. And I realized with VR chat, it was very social, but it was really going towards a area of like I guess virtual reality where it was escaping the fun and turning into more creepy. And I want to focus on a game that really focuses just on the fun and connecting with people without having a potential to go down a line of anything that's kind of disturbing or creepy to people.
Hmm.
Sure, obviously it's not going to be filtered and people are still able to do what they want. It's just the main premise of the game is to actually make sure it's still fun and sociable.
Awesome. And then did you see like NFTs or the NFT community as a good place to actually realize this kind of idea or did you see
So
the NFT?
one of the
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna. So, like, one of the things is what I initially saw of NFTs is a way for projects to kind of provide ownership as well as funding for a project that has a meaning to, because essentially all the like the funding that goes towards a project. Should I change the server settings in case people are lagging? Um, 'Cause change it to Europe. Hopefully that will help.
Seems fine. I mean, there's a slight delay. I also want to acknowledge that this will
Uh,
be wrong in the video because it's mirrored, and it really bothers me.
okay.
But I'm not going to change it now. Anyways, ownership and NFTs.
Yeah. So in terms of ownership, yeah. So like for example, in an MMO, the main premise is to kind of provide ownership to all players. And one thing that I found out through really understanding the aspect of NFTs is that you can actually provide everyone a part of it. And it was seeing more of a profile picture, which is why we haven't really launched a profile picture collection until the avatars, which was a very long time ago. I mean, like a long time from the initial start, was because we want to provide everyone ownership of all the key features of the game before we start really um, pushing the whole profile pictures aspect. So that's why we launched, Genesis, certificates, the factions, like a lot of the core features, so people actually have access to the foundation of the game and like the foundational blockchain layer. And it also provided a way for projects to get funding, as well as provide a transaction between, this is the NFT and this is what it's going to have for the game. And we've provided, so like 3 weeks after our initial mint, we launched staking for Realm. So it provided everyone an opportunity to also earn tokens, as well as use it for different collections we hosted, and just showed that these NFTs had more meaning to just something that was promised, and then 4 months later launch something, which is why at the start we needed to launch it as soon as possible, because it was actually one of the foundational layers of the project.
Right. Yeah. How do you feel like? I mean, I think mentioning ownership and community, and basically community ownership of a project, is a very interesting concept, and something that is kind of unique to the blockchain space, and a unique opportunity. Like, was that one of the more exciting things about it, or was it just a necessity to kind of like, okay, we need to fundraise for this project, I guess we'll give the community a stake also?
I'm sorry, you were cutting up a bit. I couldn't hear the last 10 seconds.
I'm just curious about the connection, like for you as basically the project founder, giving the community an actual stake, so to speak, in the project, raising funds through NFTs and through these things, but then actually, like the community retaining that ownership. Is that something that was more happenstance, or was that something, or was it a reason for you to actually go into that realm?
Into the realm. Yeah, so in terms of the way that we approached it, was whether or not it did succeed, we would have still proceed forward in the same fashion. So even moving forward from now, we would still proceed the way that we are, whether or not there is funding or not, because the project to us is the end product, not just, like the sales or whatever. We're focused on, delivering the project that we want to deliver. So the decisions that we make are more around, a repositioning of the project, as long as it aligns correctly based on the market.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the development of the project. Obviously, when you first started selling, eGold was at, I don't know, 300, 350 or something a piece. And then, the crash, the market crash and all of that came. How did that affect and change maybe the project as well?
Well, so one thing that it did change was really the perspective of how the people saw those crashes, is because even though the prices of everything fell, as well as, the economies, like there's a global recession, a lot of inflation, is that even though that's happening, there's still a lot of lack of education of what that actually means. So there's just because, the price is falling, it doesn't mean people are getting educated. So I think it really shows more of the lack of a gap that needs to be filled of, the investors' knowledge and actually what it means for price. Because right now people think price is an indicative of a success of a project, rather than just how the market perceives something. And it's most likely because they haven't been around since, I guess, the early bull run, besides the last one, is because they would think, announcements during bear markets means, always price goes up, or, it means success, but rather it actually just means it's just not, in terms of a trader, there's really nothing to trade on. But for people who actually see the project developing, they know that it's going to keep its promises, its milestones, and it's just a long-term thing.
Yeah. And there too, so how did that impact what you were doing, and in terms of what you're doing now? We talked a little bit about already, kind of repositioning, reimagining what the world looks like in order to be able to deliver a product, and then also in order for the project to thrive in the long term, and not just in a market where people are doing a ton of volume on secondaries.
Sorry, just because it's freezing a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, you asked what was the plan, the current plan in terms of the market and how we are responding to it.
Right. How did plans change because of the market changes and the
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I initially realized after, actually speaking to our partner OCS is that OCS's approach was a lot different to everyone in the space, where they actually focused more of executing their business vision rather than executing a NFT project. And even though you can actually say that it's just an NFT project in some people's eyes, it's actually a business that's aiming for a service for existing like brick and mortar stores, which includes NFTs and blockchain. And after that discussion with yourself, Lucas, is that it made me realize the current space is very narrow with its vision, where you need to just focus on Elrond and get as much funding as you can from the Elrond people, monetize as many on like different avenues, and that allowed me to kind of rethink of how Karitha's vision will actually be around in the long term. Because let's say the floor prices go up, or another, like let's say Decentraland is that they're close to $1 billion market cap, and they're a game or a sandbox, and they only had less than 30 players online, despite having a close to 1 billion. So like that to me is a failure of a blockchain project, because it's not actually bringing adoption. But to people who invest into it, they probably made a lot of money, so they're happy. So like, but in terms of the actual space, it hasn't really moved forward. And that's when I realized, actually with Karitha, we have an opportunity, because we're still very early, and Multiverse X is still very early with its rebrand and its focus of the metaverse, is that we're able to really focus on the future state instead of just focusing on the current state of the market.
And there, so let's talk about that, because I mean, obviously, our projects became partners, or there is kind of a partnership that is also there for the long term, but it's also it goes well for both of the visions of the projects, right? So I don't really want to talk too much about OCS here, because it's all about Karitha. But the idea really for us was to bring together people around the world, and also connect them to real value in the real world, apart from also having great benefits online. And I think that can really be applied to any industry. And the gaming industry is, of course, like a huge industry, and also one that lends itself very well to Web3, to giving ownership to players and all of that. So can you speak a little bit about on how your, what your vision is of kind of adapting that model and applying it to Karitha?
Yeah, so one thing that really stood out to me was when we had a discussion about how the NFTs is another form of kind of like a digital membership. And one of the questions I posed to you was kind of like, what is the difference? And I realized in saying that, it made me forget what blockchain was about, where the Web3 aspect is once you have the NFT, you're actually able to access something completely different. So in the Karitha version of the metaverse, so we have Realm, which is our parent brand. I can go into detail of that in a bit later. But Karitha's vision is the gaming perspective of where we want to onboard partners into the space. So instead of just focusing on smaller demographics or individuals, we want to actually onboard other projects that's either on other chains, but rather focus on internet cafes, board games, even anything that's related to the gaming industry to actually participate in a metaverse. Because Second Life is a very prominent game where a lot of actually businesses use that as an advertising space, and it is actually one of the first metaverses people don't realize. And that's something I actually want to incorporate the NFT aspect to them, to allow them, okay, well, we can create you a customizable SFT where you can provide to your customers either mintable or for free, depending on how we approach it. Where they're able to access our community as well as their own benefits, because we want to create different SFTs for each partner, where it has two levels of access, which is the Karitha metaverse as well as their own community thing.
Yeah, so let's go into some detail about basically what the partnership between OCS and Karitha looks like, because that's going to be the first of many, hopefully, and there's basically a vision behind that. So tell the people what we're gonna do, more or less.
So, to start off, it was more, it's why I think it's really fascinating when you have people who are visionaries. I initially started with me and Lukas like, dude, do you think OCS would fit? We're like, yeah, I reckon it'd be pretty cool. And then it developed over time to think, actually, we can do a lot for you based on what we have planned. So with the Karitha brand, we want to actually provide a customizable user experience for each partner we onboard. So for example, OCS is a very different industry to, let's say, a gaming cafe, because the cannabis industry in Europe is completely different to other countries and whatever. So we had to think of a way to allow OCS as well as every other partner the same type of tools and provide a different experience. So with OCS, we want to actually provide them, let's say, different types of like milestones, or like, I guess the kind of the easiest explanation to people is a loyalty program where, you know, OCS can set these settings within their metaverse where each user can do an activity or do some type of interaction, whether it's go to an event or socialize or interact with different businesses or partners within the space. And then they get like points or some type of tradable currency where they can actually contribute to something from the OCS shop, for instance. So essentially that meant that we want to onboard the OCS's partners. So how many cafes do you have guys onboarded?
I think how many did we release yet? I don't want to say too many because we have a bunch more. I think four at the moment.
From my understanding, yeah. That's what I've counted. So if I'm not mistaken. So we want to provide a way for OCS to also place their partners' cafe within their metaverse, and their partners are then able to log into I guess an admin of that store and then customize it based on whatever OCS and the partner agrees on. So that meant that we need to create these tools that allows our first partner, OCS, to also onboard additional people, whether it's an actual cafe or even just other projects, depending on how you want to go forward with it. And that meant we have a lot more room for creativity, because once these tools are set, it means every business can be onboarded in the same way. And what makes us different is that we're also customizing assets as well as branded items for your community, as well as providing your community an opportunity to also directly design or inspire designs for the game, and then also have them recorded as one of the people that created this idea for the OCS. So that way it's always being known as, okay, this was an OCS member who provided this idea.
Yeah, and that's really awesome. I just want to reiterate basically what this partnership is going to do is we as a community, and this involves the Karitha community, of course, as well, are able to design a new piece of land, basically custom items, custom buildings, all kinds of stuff, put that into this metaverse. We'll be able to have events in that space. Our partners, like partner shops, will be able to customize their own buildings, host their own events for their communities, like may it be a Spanish community or a French or like different communities in that space, have community events that bring people together. And of course, now let's also talk about your ideas with, you mentioned the gaming cafes and that stuff, and I think that's a really interesting aspect, because for us it was always like we need adoption, and we need to provide real use cases to bring about adoption, and it's hard for people to conceptualize something that seems as abstract as like a digital decentralized database. Like, okay, what am I going to do with it? And so like bringing people into this is, I think, the hardest part. I think once you see the use cases, it's not very hard to understand why it makes sense to do this. But talk about some of the plans that regard the onboarding process and connecting sort of the traditional gaming world, Web 2, or even like in-person gaming to blockchain and to Karitha and to Web 3.
Yeah, so one thing that it was very prominent in Australia was there's been an ongoing fandom for the esports scene in Australia, especially Victoria. We have a lot of cafes that watch esports. Most prominent is League of Legends. They have like these events when these competitions have been hosted and a bunch of people get together, as well as a a lot of international students when they come here that they're in the 24/7 cafes where they're able to play games. The speed in the internet cafes are actually fast compared to, what you would get at their own home. So it was really an opportunity for us to want to onboard a community where it has an overlap. And for us, as a game that we're developing, the first game, which is the Web 2 version, which is the sandbox we're developing, which is what OCS will be a part of, we want to provide them early access to what they can see the game is going to be, and then also provide them insights. Actually, you can watch games in person as well as host them in the world. Because of course, there's you can't really play games within it. Like, let's say you want to play League of Legends within Karitha, you can't do that, but you can watch videos. You can integrate. Like, we want to integrate social media, or Twitch TV, YouTube live streams, and anything that's live streamable onto the platform to allow people to actually come around and watch and really socialize, as well as have an opportunity for the cafes to have customer touch points where, let's say they want to go to through a sign or whatever, where they interact and they get a onboarding process to actually go to their cafe, what they can benefit from being a partner between Karitha as well as their game, and whether that's discounts or early access to different types of games or events that they want to host, because we want to be very community focused around gamer adoption instead of just blockchain adoption. Because Karitha's sandbox is meant to bring gamers into the perception of what metaverses mean, and then introduce them to the actual metaverse in Web3. Because there's a misconception that a metaverse is Web3, but rather a metaverse is just the easy access between point A and point B, whether that's business A and business B within the same type of world. So we want to provide that same type of experience to just normal gamers to actually onboard them into the space. And that's why we chose internet cafes, because they're gamers and they actually like to play games that are early, because, whether maybe they want to post it on TikTok or they want to post it on YouTube, they want to be the first in something, especially when it's something that could be very big. And the benefits for certain cafes we onboard is that it provides them additional touch points. Sorry if there's noise. I am on a balcony because it's the only place I can find in the apartment I'm on or in. So essentially, we want to provide them different touch points in a virtual world, as well as ways for them to benefit in person.
Yeah. And how does the rebranding of Elrond as Multiverse X, how did you guys, will that affect you? Will that help? How does that correspond with your development and help your plans?
Yeah, so when I found out about that, I was actually super happy, because it's a lot easier to pitch an idea that aligns from Karitha as well as the blockchain level, because it's, from my experience from dealing with different types of people in business, especially in Australia, they're not really fast forwarding digital. So explaining to them, let's say you have this app called Elrond, this network called Elrond, and you have this app called Amir, they're like, okay, what's the difference? It's very vague unless they kind of know the Lord of the Rings or whatever. And it kind of just really seemed more of a joke. So it's good that the rebrand actually is very focused on the metaverse, because that is everything what we're doing, but we're providing it on a gamer level as well as a business level. And if we still have time, I can go into detail of what business level is, because that's related to our parent brand. But in terms of Karitha, it means we are able to align our pitches with the metaverse or Multiverse X in a deeper way to actually provide them insights. Actually, this is all one type of package, where this Karitha is built on something that's meant for metaverses, and it's designed in a way to make sure it's very optimized and give them confidence that they're a part of something that's just not small, which is, Karitha. Because now that we're actually the same as multiverses metaverse positioning, we're able to actually have a bigger pitch to businesses, because they're able to see that it's not just a small idea, it's actually a part of a bigger idea.
Yeah, so do you, I'm happy to at least touch on some of the aspects of the business aspect that you wanted to mention as far as Karitha is concerned and going forward.
So one of the biggest changes is that in terms of the strategy wise, it's big. In terms of the name, it's probably not that big. So it used to be called the Realm of Karitha, and when we introduced Club Nano, we introduced the Realm 113, which is just or 5, which is relating to our token supply, Genesis supply. It had a lot of different types of meanings, but I've always wanted something that makes more of a holistic view of the world we're creating. So it helps now that Karitha is its own brand of focusing on gamer adoption in a very specific community, and then Realm is actually a parent brand where it focuses on further adoption for just a metaverse experience of for customer journeys. So one thing that's missing from a lot of, I guess, normal adoption is that it's boring and it's not meant to like really improve lives and like with the lifestyle, but rather the blockchain and the metaverse can actually improve the lifestyle everyone has on a very integrated level of Web3, and that's what we're trying to focus with Realm is that we want to customize the customer journey that each business has with their customers with a metaverse or blockchain integration.
Hence, the OCS membership is essentially a very good example of what that would mean in
Yeah.
practice. And talk more about so that's the realm. No, that's Karitha, and then Club Nano is going to also play a role in this, or are you? How are the different kind of brands working together?
Yeah, so one of the biggest changes we did when we relaunched the new UI is that we introduced gaming cartridges, and each gaming cartridge is a different type of game. So we have 2 games or 3 games, which is the character demo we have. We have a Space Invader type game, which is within the Club Nemo realm, which is just essentially just a bunch of mini games, and then we also have like a drawing mini game. And they're all in like very early testing, but essentially we want to integrate a lot of the other games within the one gaming console, which is what we have at the moment. And we want the experience to be all related to a user profile, which is when the avatars came into play. Because once you have your avatar, you can actually join any of the games, and then you're able to actually discuss with other players with just the one user, and then that one user can then ideally go online, register a different type of like profile, like another verification, and then you can actually we want to integrate you can attach wallets to it, because the main premise of the Karitha sandbox is not to be affiliated with NFTs, so we can actually launch on Steam as well as other platforms that don't allow NFTs, but it still is connected, because once you've verified your user profile, you can actually access the Web3 metaverse that we have once you go into like the dApps and like you go deep dive into the company.
Cool. I think I want to start wrapping it up. I want to like so we can have time for some of these questions. But I think one of the big things is always the whens, and I'm sure they're coming in the questions and chats as well. But in terms of a timeline and a kind of a development plan, let's talk about like how you're rolling out the new concept, what kind of the ideas are for the timeline, updates to the roadmap, and how the changes are basically affecting the project in the near, mid, and long term.
Yeah, so in terms of the biggest changes we have is the approach to Web 2. That means we're able to monetize an additional avenue. So once we finalize putting out all the information, and I'm also waiting for a new logo from a creative agency I've hired in Australia, and that's working on the new character logo. And once that's live, I'll be able to actually start pushing out more content, more, I guess, pitch decks to different types of businesses as well as investment firms online. But mainly, we want to focus on the adoption, similar to how you guys first brought adoption and then you have your community. So we want to be able to do everything in a seamless way instead of doing it one by one. So once the new logo should be done by December, that will be a separate like launching date for like the new branding style. But we have a new website that's being developed at the moment, which should be live this month, and our dApp for the new staking version should be live. But then for the strategic changes we're making, we're expecting it to be like all announced within by the first Q1 of like 2023. But in terms of executing it, we're planning to at least execute with some businesses and find new partners within that realm within by the end of December. But by the Q1, we should have at least, like, we're aiming for at least 5 normal businesses that's not affiliated to blockchain adopted. And within blockchain space, not just Elrond, we want to at least bring another maybe 1 to 2 different types of big projects into the Karitha sandbox to showcase more of a opportunity. And something I've discussed with you was we're aiming to launch a more of a public alpha in January for the sandbox, which is just editing and, you know, like this building land and whatever, and socializing, just to give more of a testing phase of like bugs and fixes that we can do, because onboarding a bunch of different testers has helped us a lot, because we've made some great progress since the first launch of the game. And we're expecting a lot of the good strategic as well as the Web2 adoption to be completed by, you know, end of Q1. And in terms of the Web3 adoption, in terms of like, you know, new staking dashboards and new things, it's very dependable on the funding from the businesses who are onboarding.
Yeah.
We can launch things step by step based on, you know, the current prices on Elrond. But in terms of, you know, going deep dive into that, it wouldn't be less effective for the long term. It'll actually be like making the project end early. So we're trying to ensure everything works out better instead of just rushing something that's not going to bring immediate revenue. So we're focusing on the Web2 adoption, which should be finalized like strategically by the end of December, but executed properly by the end of Q1.
Okay, cool. I think one question that actually ties in with the financing and all of that, I think, so MetaMax was wondering if the royalty reduction is compatible with the sustainable financial vision of the project, and I think it actually speaks to some of the stuff we've been discussing from moving the revenue model to basically the real world. Maybe you want to touch on that.
So one thing that everyone should realize is it doesn't matter about royalties, because no one actually really trades on marketplaces. Everyone does peer-to-peer. So even like land is set at 3%, I believe, and on Framer it's 2%, and that still gets a lot of peer-to-peer trading. So it made me realize, like, it doesn't matter what royalties you set the project at, everyone will prefer to peer-to-peer. So instead of trying to like cater to very small percentages, we want to actually bring new revenue streams from different like sources where it's more lucrative.
Right. So to answer the question, then, you see the royalty reduction as having basically nothing to do with the sustainability of the project.
Can you repeat that question?
Just to answer the question, does you see the royalty reduction as compatible with the sustainable financial vision? Because in effect, the project doesn't really depend or rely on the royalties to begin with, because they're not there.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like I think people underestimate how much royalties there are, but there's a lot more trading done peer-to-peer than there is on marketplaces for a lot of collections. So it doesn't even matter if they're even 0%, people would still do peer-to-peer. So it means that we just need to actually bring in more revenue streams, because trading volume is very based on FOMO and hype, and it's not reliable. And we want to actually bring something that's reliable, because that means the project can actually live on.
Couldn't agree more. Henry from Drifters was in the Discord. Anything you want to tell the community about this?
I mean, I don't think there's anything to that. I just think he just joined the Discord. But yeah, so I think I just saw him join and I said hello. That's it.
New round of capital raising. Do you have anything planned? I think we kind of touched on that through the new businesses, but maybe you want to explicitly answer that.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is when it comes to funding. So I've spoken to a lot of different projects on different chains. Is that when you're seeking funding, you should also understand the different types of states you'll be in within, like, let's say 1 to 4 months. Because let's say in 1 month your valuation is let's say 100, but you know you'll release certain deliverables on the way by the fourth month, and your valuation will be a lot more because it's a penny stock or a very micro stock. So like your valuation will increase. So that means you'll give the VCs and investors a smaller, I guess, share of the total supply. So that means you're actually able to get more funding as well as not really screwing over your initial investors. Because when you invest or open funding super early, you're giving a lot of the supply to investors.
Yeah. Staking for Realm, any plans?
No immediate plans, but there is planned changes to the way that Realm is used, as well as the way that NFT staking for every collection will be used.
Do you want to talk about that, or is that something you'd rather keep for now?
So, in broad sense, is that what I've come up with was a strategy to ensure every collection of ours is deflationary, where certain types of staking will have higher returns, but it means that the NFT will soon get burnt. And it actually isn't, once it's like, let's say staked, you can't trade it after a certain point because all the realm that it produces is gone. So it's essentially like, LK Mex or Lock Mex. We want to incorporate a similar aspect for every collection of ours where they're able to get a certain amount of realm based on it, but then it means the total supply gets smaller.
I like that idea. Interesting. I was just thinking about, that sounds like the Lock Mex plan. Slimes, my dear slimes. What about the slimes, Amir?
Yeah, so in terms of slimes, because we've just onboarded, we've just spoken to Andrew from Lucky Birds, and we've now got like a DApp sorted. So there is plans to launch a lot of different types of staking, and one of the stakings that will be included is the slime staking. But the timeline of that isn't set in stone, but it is planned because we now have a one-stop shop for everything Web3, which fits our vision.
Let's talk about that partnership since we're on it. So Lucky Birds, for anybody who hasn't heard of them, they're one of the early collections that actually launched in the space as well. They're building a metaverse playable game. They have a 2D cute bird Took collection. What can you talk about the partnership, how that came about, and what basically the roles are in that partnership?
Yeah, I think there was this guy called Lukas who connected me with Andrew. I was talking to Lukas and I was like, do you know any like new devs? Because we wanted to move to a more docs team. So we parted ways with Ertzi to push forward with a very docs team to provide more confidence to VCs. Because they actually want to know who they're invested in. So now that we're working with Andrew as they're going to help us with everything Web3 related, and I'll be working with them as a strategic and business advisor for sales and marketing. So we have a kind of a mutual relationship in that aspect. While they produce the Web3 stuff that you're able to access, and some of the people in our testing community has already seen a new DApp, but it gives us more of a confined, this is a team that's going to focus on just this area, because at the moment, pretty much every change and update has been done by 3 people, and we've actually really outpaced a lot of projects in other chains, as well as I actually haven't been up to date with Auron, because I'm trying to focus on a broader aspect and bring more people, but I know that we've developed a lot in terms of our game and the project overall. So I know that once we have this Web3 solid, I will set in stone, we're able to actually proceed in parallel with each other in a very a fashion that actually VCs as well as a community prefers.
Mm-hmm. There are already many Karitha NFTs with early investors. What plans do you have to attract new investors so they don't feel like they're late?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I don't think I understand it.
I'm also not quite sure. I think the question is basically the community that you now have. They hold. I'm assuming quite a few large holders. What are the plans of attracting new holders, bringing in new community members to Karitha, without them either being priced out or feeling that they're too late to buy into the project?
Well, there's going to be like, so I guess it's really one of those things where it's an if, so it's very hard to really, I guess, assume what will happen because, everyone's price is subjective. But of course, if something's priced out, no one's forced to buy something, or if something's cheap, no one's forced to buy anything. So the whole point of the game has always been to be able to be both enjoyable, fun, as well as free, but at the same time also provide benefits to people who own it at multiple levels, whether it's like different types of things as like a digital identity, digital verification, as long as it doesn't defer, like it becomes to a very like common Asian MMO. So like their styles is a lot of pay to win and all grinding, but that ruins the fun of games. And we don't want to go down that route where, let's say, everything you purchase adds a very pay to win wall. So we're looking at ways to incorporate just a very specific Web3 where a web-based Web3 version. So every type of NFT. So this is something that wasn't discussed because it's still in execution phase, like in terms of the strategy, is that the new NFT strategy, staking and things like that will be related to the new web-based version of Karitha we're launching, where every collection has its perks. So in terms of bringing new investors, really, it's not really an easy question to answer because it really depends what people perceive as high or low. Because, the whole point of bringing adoption during is to just bring them into a community, and whether or not they buy or not isn't the premise. It's actually just to grow the entire ecosystem of Karitha.
It's a common business thing, users versus profits. You kind of want to build a user base before you actually monetize that. So I'm assuming that's also the idea behind having the sandbox basically be a free to play world. I hope that answers the question. More slime staking questions. Our dear friend Vlad is wondering if there is a plan of reducing the interval of launching the game. I'm not quite sure where you get the timelines from. I'll just read it and you can make of it what you will. I know it's a complex process, but let's say, did you think of any plan of reducing the 3 to 4 years needed development to, let's say, 2 years? This means more employees as a first point. Are there funds to do this? Would that be possible? Would blah 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 would reduce the risks, losing value, and earning royalties proportionally with the NFT value. It's an important process in keeping the funding of the project constant. I think most of this we actually addressed in basically the shift of the concept of where funding comes from for Karitha. But maybe you want to talk a little bit about the plans for the game development, the phases of the game.
I think it may have not been here at the start, but essentially the whole point of the repositioning and having 2 versions is to actually create that interval. So we're launching the sandbox first, and that means we're bringing people into the space of Karitha. And the Web3 versions of staking and things like that, we're planning to launch within the time frame because it's just going to be web-based. The whole point of having an average timeline of development for games is to give people an idea this is what games take to launch, and whether or not you have a massive team or a small team, like that's on average every type of team out there. So it's not really about do you have finances or do you have not finances. It's really just how we launched a game, which is what we already changed, which is what we discussed earlier in terms of this is what we're going to do with the sandbox, bring people into the space while we're developing the bigger picture.
Yeah. This is actually an interesting question that I'm also... one of the things that impressed me about Karitha in the beginning, or since the beginning, was the factions, the lore, the individual lore of the factions, and that. Do you have plans of kind of how you want to expand that and let people maybe launch their own things and all that? I was privy to a conversation the other day.
Yes, sir.
But yeah.
Yeah, so something that came to me, I believe it was actually yesterday or 2 days ago, but and funny enough, you're involved, Lucas. So there's someone I'm discussing with, and he gave me ideas of like creating different types of verification, different types of like identities for factions, because we're rebranding as well as the faction icons, the identities, and the gaming aspect of each faction, and actually providing more insights to the benefits of them. So we're going to discuss ways to also add an identity that's also in a form of SFT beyond just a faction card. So like, different types of like items or like little things like that, but all part of like a bigger collective of a community. So that way there's benefits for each person that's a part of the system. And we want to connect, we are connected with more community members who have created different things and actually coming together with them to actually build something together for each faction.
Yeah. Any collections planned in that direction as well?
Short answer, yes. And I guess to add more insight, no, they won't be through like minting or stuff. There's going to be like actual activities and things that are determined. So they're just going to be based on a faction, not the Karitha as like a project or a company, but the faction level.
Great. I think we covered the questions from chat. Is there anything that you wanted to add that we didn't cover?
Not that I can think of. Maybe if you want to give your perspective of what the OCS metaverse means for you, and in terms of the Karitha partnership, I'd love to kind of use that as a summary of what we've been discussing.
Yeah, well, I think I basically mentioned most of the important points earlier when I think the exciting thing about bringing people together and bringing people from the real world into the metaverse and also having them connect in a meaningful way, both in person, be it at like a gaming shop or at a coffee shop where they can actually sit down and play Karitha or other games, is that we can really actually bridge the gap between connecting with people in real life, but then also being able to hang out with them outside of the real world, and also being able to connect with people that share interests, goals, and all that in a metaverse. So for us, what's really exciting is that we get to build or be part of building a real a world that is kind of custom made for us and can actually be basically claimed by the community that we're serving, and I think that's the exciting part, that people will actually get to hang out in a world that they themselves design and that they can kind of feel connected to in an intimate way. So for us, the idea behind the partnership is really translating the real world aspect into the metaverse, being able to give our partners representation in that world, giving them the opportunity to host events, to do engaging activities, giveaways, all kinds of great things that you can do online, and then be able to connect different shops who aren't in the same place, because we'll soon be transcontinental, right? And there's no immediate plans to fly everybody to the same place. And like having that space for the community, and also to bring in new community members and show them in a very accessible way how blockchain can be used to build community is what we're really excited about.
It's awesome to hear, yeah, because what you're explaining is the exact reason why we want to go down that route, is because we want to actually provide communities an actual platform to connect with the community across the globe and essentially become a part of a virtual world that everyone's created.
Uncle Ducker has a very good question. How much POG is too much POG?
I think that question is unpog, so I think there is no total. So to reach a total of POG, you can't stop pogging.
And Flat wants to once again about the lore. There's the map. Did you think about hiring 3D artists? in order to make short cinematic videos that gradually will cover the world of Karitha, exposure, etc.
So yeah, that just like how we've mentioned in terms of like, you know, what we're like going towards, that's not a priority. And just as you mentioned, hiring 3D artists, that's just not what the funds should be spent on, because that's a gamble of whether or not something's going to actually be profitable. So the whole point of the shift is to make sure the revenues and the processes that we take to reach an endpoint is actually like providing revenue, not just gambling, essentially.
And a final when question: when heroes?
When heroes? Good question. The answer is, well, ideally December, but at the moment we're wanting to pause the character collections and things like that for people. We want to actually start focusing more of the actual adoption, the utility, and bring in more attention than just releasing another collection so fast, because we have a plan and we want to make sure we stick to it, because this is going to be really a fundamental shift where we're not just focusing on the NFT community, we're actually focusing on gamers. We're focusing on businesses. We're focusing on something that's other than just blockchain and cryptocurrency, which is going to be a huge step for us as a project focusing on adoption.
Awesome. I think we'll cut it here. Thanks, Amir, for your time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for the questions. I hope it cleared up some stuff, and I hope you learned a little bit more about where the project is going, how the new concept fits in with kind of the maybe the rebranding of Elrond to Multiverse X, and the partnerships that are forged along the way. So thank you.